Convention will be in order. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. O God, by your grace you have called us in this diocese to a goodly fellowship of faith. Bless all our clergy and all your people. Grant that your word may be truly preached and truly heard, your sacraments faithfully administered and faithfully received. By your Spirit, fashion our lives according to the example of your Son, and grant that we may show the power of your love to all among whom we live, through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
The Chair recognizes the Secretary for announcements.
I would remind you that the exhibit area closes at 3 p.m. Also remind you to please do take some time and fill out your evaluation form. I have received notice of the winners of the Emmerich Retreat Center raffle prizes. The Vizio TV, Ellis Clifton.
Sit down. You are hereby forbidden to put a raffle ticket into another TV raffle. This is 2 years in a row. I think this is fixed.
Two-night rental of the Ayers House at Emmerich Retreat Center, Zola Smith. The Kindle Fire 6, Ray Lee Baxter. The Fitbit Flex, Laura Crespo. The overnight stay and breakfast at the Hyatt Place in Novi, Beth Rowley. And the family game night, Jane Carpenter. And then a thank you from the Emmerich Board to everyone who participated.
The pages are passing among you, passing out the Are You Willing to Serve forms. I would ask you to be mindful of filling these out, please. We do use them when vacancies come available. And in case you remember the ballot that you just filled out today, there are going to be some vacancies that will have to be filled post-convention. So if you are interested, particularly in any of those positions where there was no election because there were no candidates, please be sure to mark those and fill out your form carefully so we can read your name and how to get a hold of you. It does no good if we don't know how to reach you. Okay? So please fill those out, and after you finish completing them, leave them on the table. We will pick them up at the end of convention. The Chair recognizes the Secretary for the purpose of reporting on the results of the first ballot.
I will not read the numbers of votes cast where there was not a contested election, only where there was a contest. Cathedral Chapter Lay, Chip Dissinger elected. Cathedral Chapter Clergy, 226 votes cast, 113 necessary for election. Paul Leclerc, 103. Mary Jane Peck, 123, elected. Commission on Ministry, Clergy, number of votes cast, 223. Necessary for election, 112. Drew Van Keulen, 78. David Glazer, 145, elected. Disciplinary Board Lay, Brenda Philpott, elected. Disciplinary Board Clergy, Cindy Corner, elected. Standing Committee Lay, 223 votes cast, necessary for election 112. Andy Ayanu, 97. Jeffrey Schmirek, 126 elected. Standing Committee Clergy, 1 to be elected, 224 votes cast. Necessary for election, 112. Terry Pilarski, 99.
113.
It should be 113. Terry Pilarski, 99. Paula Miller, 125, elected. Trustees Lay, Robert Beebe, and George Port, elected. Trustees Clergy, number of votes cast, 225. Necessary for election, 113. William Roberts, 70. Andrea Morrow, 155, elected. There is no need for a second ballot.
No applause, no applause. I don't know if you're applauding because we don't need a second ballot or you're applauding for those who were elected, so no applause, period. Thank you. The chair would like to recognize and call upon the Reverend Michelle Meach, convener of the Race Relations and Diversity Task Force. The task force will present ways to get involved and connected in the ongoing work of race relations and diversity conversations and etc.
Thank you, Bishop. I'd also like to introduce Ms., right? Not Doctor, yeah. Ms. Katie Oppenheim, a member of the Race Relations and Diversity Task Force. She's going to get us started, and then I'll speak, and then you all get to talk to each other again.
Good afternoon. My name's Katie Oppenheim, and I'm actually a nurse, so to be called doctor would be kind of... and I'm a member of St. Luke's Ypsilanti, and I want to thank Bishop Gibbs for placing a very high priority on the important issues that we're going to discuss this afternoon, and for the Reverend Michelle Meach for implementing the task force throughout this diocese. I've been active in social justice issues since I was a teenager, picketing with the United Farm Workers in Central California, volunteering at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, an inner-city church in Boston's South End, working as a nurse in a Cambodian refugee camp in the early 80s, and now working full-time in the labor movement as president of a large local union. This task force is my first experience, though, in a long time of joining my long-held social justice commitment with the work of the church. Why now? Because I firmly believe that as followers of Jesus, we are commanded first to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Second, we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Loving our neighbors implies tearing down walls that God never intended us to use as vehicles of racism, prejudice, and discrimination. Loving our neighbors is about embracing our diversity, reconciling our differences, breaking down boundaries, and seeing the Christ that is in each one of us. That's why I intended to be active in this task force. This afternoon, after Michelle gives an overview of the history of this task force, you will be asked to discuss 3 questions at your tables, after which there will be time for those who wish to share insights with the group to do so. But before Michelle continues, I invite you to listen to a prayer by Rabbi Chaim Stern, who was one of the Freedom Riders in Mississippi in 1961. It is titled Prayer for Overcoming Indifference. For the sin of silence, for the sin of indifference, for the secret complicity of the neutral, for the closing of borders, for the washing of hands, for the crime of indifference, for the sin of silence, for the closing of borders, for all that was done, for all that was not done, let there be no forgetfulness before the throne of glory. Let there be remembrance within the human heart, and let there at last be forgiveness when your children, O God, are free and at peace. Let us join together in this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. So if Rick will help me. Thank you. Over the summer, Bishop Gibbs sent out a letter to the diocese. Many people received it and read it, and many people didn't receive access to it. For whatever reason, it wasn't withheld on purpose. I'm quite sure of that. But a part of that letter gave us a charge to lead the diocese in our corporate ministry to respond to the disease of hate that continues to infect our country through all the isms and phobias, such as racism, sexism, ableism, ageism, classism, homophobia, xenophobia, and moving us toward an ethic of respect and gratitude for the incredible beauty of God's full and diverse creation. This was the charge given to us that was encompassed in an invitation to join the Race Relations and Diversity Task Force for the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan. Specifically, our task then is to work with all of us, all ministers of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan, everyone in all of our congregations, so that we all might be more intentionally oriented toward the work of shifting oppressive structures and examining personal prejudice. We will listen, seeking to understand one another out of love, and we will advocate for internal change in our congregations, as well as external change in our communities, our state, and in our country. So this charge and this task is something that I've been talking about as I've done these convening meetings across the diocese beginning in late June. You may have seen announcements about joining us for a Race Relations and Diversity Task Force organizational meeting. And those organizational meetings have intentionally not been about talking about issues, but more about talking about how we can just sort of get on the road and start running and talk as we go, because there's a lot of work to do. We just met with Heidi Kim, who we're so blessed to have brought her to the diocese, or for her to be here at the diocese with us today, as she reminded us that we also need to talk about the why. Why are we doing the work that we're called to do? Before we can decide which curriculum, we need to figure out what our hearts are telling us about why the work is before us. What is it that we're called to engage? Why are we called to engage in this work to begin with? So these conversations are going to be happening parallel. What are we doing and why are we doing it? I'm fond of using the phrase building the plane while flying it. Some of my colleagues in ministry have reminded me that's a little bit of an alarming phrase to use. So we might want to talk about creating. What are we creating as we move through? How are we evolving? How are we allowing God's work to be done through us as we move forward? And so a part of this, sort of a calling, a way of a charge, like when Mel Gibson does that thing in Braveheart, right? I don't even know what he says, but it's a thing that we say when we're ready to go forward. This is what we say. It has to come from a place of love. This work has to come from a place of love. And so I thought this quote might help us in framing the work that we have. This is from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he said, "You have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt." There's no way we can do this work unless we come from a place of love. So talking a little bit more about our connections. Last year at convention, we announced that there was the formation of an interdiocesan task force called the Lower Peninsula Diversity Task Force. And those members, I don't know, I haven't seen Emery here, but I know Bill Hale is here. You could stand up, Bill, wherever you are. There you are. And also, not on this page, but Juanita Woods is joining that task force as well. Where's Juanita? There she is. So please give them a round of applause. Juanita, Emery, and Bill will be joining ministers from the Diocese of Eastern Michigan and Western Michigan in their continued work to work together as to what are the ways that the three dioceses can work together to support the ongoing work in our individual dioceses, in our cities, in our towns, and our countryside. The Race Relations and Diversity Task Force right now has two forms of communication that you can find out what's happening. One is the web page. It is not updated right now because I ran out of time this week, so I'll get to it. But the web page is right off of the diocesan website under Race and Diversity. If you click on Resources and then click down to Race and Diversity Task Force, or you can just use that URL. The other way is through the Facebook. Through the Facebook. I sound like I'm from somewhere else. The Facebook, right? It's through Facebook. The Facebook page, which is listed there, where you can just click on like, and you can follow anything that the task force is working on, including what meetings we have coming up. The full task force doesn't meet that often. Ideally, we meet in work groups, and work groups are called work groups for a reason. They get the work done. It's a task force. And a few of these work groups have been meeting pretty steadily already. The people that are focused on youth ministry, where are you? You could stand up. And the people that are working on facilitation, if you could stand up too. If you're a member of those two work groups, please stand up. These work groups have already been meeting and planning and devising and scheming. Thank you very much. Round of applause. We've also got other work groups: direct action, public ritual, curriculum development, training, networking. So all of these different ways of being a minister, being a disciple of Jesus, are ways that you can engage in the task force. You just need to let us know how you'd like to be a part of it, and we'll put you to work. We need conveners. So if you are somebody who is someone who, if you're somebody who knows you're a convener because you're the one that's always making sure that people are getting things done, come talk to me. So conveners are a very important part of ministry because we're the ones that keep people on agenda, that make sure that we continue moving forward as a group and we don't get stuck and mired in a lot of conversation, which conversation is very important, but the work of ministry is also very important. So if you want to be connected, like I said, check out the website or the Facebook page. You can like the Facebook page or talk to someone in your congregation who is an active member of the Race Relations and Diversity Task Force. And right now, if you are a member of the task force, if you've been to an organizational meeting and you've signed up to be a member of the task force, please stand up. These are the people you can talk to. They will help you to connect you to the work of the task force. You're welcome to email me, but frankly, it's fine if you don't. You can talk to a member of the task force instead. This is not a top-down organization. This is about all of us getting engaged so that we can do our ministry that we're called to do. So today we need your help, and this is where I'm going to ask the pages to please pass out what they've been asked to pass out. Thank you very much. We need your help today. We have 3 questions. And Katie, did you want to talk about this, or do you want to talk afterward? I got it. Okay. There are 3 questions that we've posed to you, and this is where you all get to talk to each other some more. And just like this morning, talking amongst your congregation and talking to the congregations around you is going to give you more voices to hear. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first question, if you would, Rick. The first question is going to be, and it's written on the sheets of paper, so you can use this to take notes. We are going to ask for these sheets of paper back because the last question is very important for our work as a task force. So please use these, have one person in the group take the notes for the group, and we'll take that one back from you. You can take notes however you want to, but if you could just have one person recording the thoughts of the group as you talk, that would be very helpful. So question 1 is, how does your congregation intentionally welcome or prepare to welcome others? How does your congregation intentionally welcome or prepare to welcome others? Go ahead, Rick. We're going to give you 15 minutes for that, or 10 minutes. Let's do 10 minutes for a question. We'll give you 10 minutes for that question. Then question 2, what people or programs does your congregation have that could spend time helping your congregation focus on diversity? And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And question 3, what are the tools or help you need to say yes to this ministry in your congregation? So if you could go back to question 1. Thank you. So this is the first question. So let's take about 10 minutes, and I'll call you back to order to talk about this question. It should be on the page 1 of that handout that you just received. Take 10 minutes, please. If you would, take the next couple minutes to wrap up your conversation. Make sure that you're writing down, someone's scribing for you. Take a few more minutes to wrap it up.
So now it's for you, Michelle. So what we're going to do this conversation, and then at the end of the third question, you'll want pages to pick up. Not a problem.
Well, we're going to do, actually, at the end of the third question, we're going to do so what? So now invite people to speak.
Excellent. So after that,
After that, we do.
fantastic. Fantastic.
Hi. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. They're discussing something. I hope so, yeah. It looks like they're pretty engaged. Yeah, I see they're engaged. Yeah. You can't really be yourself with all these cameras on you, can you? Yeah. A little distracting, isn't it? So we're going to close up this particular question and move on to the next one. And feel free to reconfigure your group if you care to, so that you get different voices and you hear different people. So question 2, what people or programs does your congregation have that could spend time helping your whole congregation focus on diversity? Let me break this out a little bit for you so you understand what we're talking about. Maybe there are people in your congregation that have particular skills, a particular experience that could help with this. There might be people or groups in your congregation, for example, a youth group, a small prayer group, that could help the entire congregation learn more about issues of race relations and diversity. So what are the if you think of these as resources or assets, is a different way to say it, not assets in the financial sense, but assets as an asset-based community development. The people and the groups that you have in your congregation or the programs that you have, how can these be utilized in helping your congregation focus on diversity? Talk amongst yourselves for 10 minutes. You can come around. take a few more minutes to wrap up this conversation. That put a damper on it. And please make sure you're scribing the group's responses, that someone in the group is scribing the responses so that we can collect them at the end. So let's go ahead and move on to question 3. And this gets at how do we actually say yes to something? So you've talked about the things, the assets that you have, if I can use that word, asset. You've talked about the assets that you have, the way you welcome people, the way you intentionally welcome people and prepare to welcome them. You've talked about the ministries and people that you have in your congregations. So you've owned the things that you have locally. What are the ways or means of support that you need to say yes? What needs to be in place in order for you to say yes? Maybe this isn't about the diocese helping with something. It could be something that you all have decided that you need to put in place. And it might be something that perhaps Whitaker could support with a class. It could be something that the Race Relations and Diversity Task Force could help with. What is it that you need to say yes to this? What needs to be in place for you to move forward into a ministry that focuses on race relations and diversity? Okay, let's take another 10 minutes to talk about this question.
always fun to see my peeps here. And Dan and his husband Clark from Selena. We're talking about their search. We're talking about our loss of research. That's what you're saying. That's famous. Yeah.
It shouldn't be not. I mean, there's enough. Yeah, there's enough similarities in how we do things that it really. And Jim's walking off into Jim, so he meets with the best friend.
Where is he?
He's back in that corner.
I've heard his name like just walking in the room. I've heard his name.
Yeah. He's a transitions officer, and so he walks through congregations.
Who does the map? The church itself.
Well, we opt into it, so there's a website called the Episcopal Asset Map, and you can log in and add the assets of your congregation there. And that's what Edie is doing. There's a table in the exhibit hall. Edie and Sharon have been sitting at pretty much around the clock, telling people get their assets mapped. That's why I started referring to using the word asset to help gear people into that mode, thinking of using the word assets not just as financial assets, but as ministries, people, the stuff.
I never thought about this. This is wonderful.
Right. Yeah, so I try to gradually use words like that in new ways so that people can orient themselves around it in a different way. So it's not just about real estate.
And also that it's not just about that window. Right? So asset mapping, that's a good thing. What is it? Because otherwise we get to all this, even the
Becomes internal
today when
language.
Heidi was talking about program, various phrases.
Yeah, we have a lot of insider language. Okay, so do you want to? Are you pointing
Hello,
at me?
sir.
Okay.
No, I just.
So do you want to lead the conversation then? Is that what
Would you like
talking
me to?
Yeah. Okay, sure. And then I think there are prayers on the PowerPoint that I put on there. I think I put a prayer on there for everyone to say together.
Okay.
I may be wrong about that, but I think it's there.
So we'll go back to question.
Just do it all again. Yeah. What insights do you have? Or you can just ask them generally.
And then
What
if
did you talk about? What insights did you have? How are you seeing things differently based on the conversations you had?
Okay.
Anything like that would trigger. And the pages, we need to make sure the pages collect them. They know what to do. We need to signal what to do.
Okay. So that would be after they say this, and then at the end there's a prayer, and I should just say together.
Yeah, say it together.
I don't remember. That must be at the end of the PowerPoint.
I changed the PowerPoint after I sent it to you.
That's okay. And I didn't get back to you either, so we're all
No,
good.
it's okay. So I got
Oh, here it
4
is.
minutes.
No, this is. Is this the?
That's the one we're going to say together. I don't think I put this one on there. I think I just put that one on there. Absolutely. So you want it to go down where the microphones are?
That would be great.
Pass it inward to that, either to any of the aisles.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
it's not as many people as I was expecting. So
Some people have left. So there's that. But yeah.
I can't go back.
Few full congregations have left. Well, St. John's from this morning. Messiah left already. So that people that weren't there, the people that were here.
What would that be if we have another one?
Just varying reasons. St. John's. Messiah, because you struggle with keeping them connected to the diocese. They do as well. Which is in a sense true. But they have black locations for larger church stuff.
You know, when I went there for the concert, I sensed that. Just
They're doing good work. I'm trying to support them.
about it. All awesome. So we all have much time for each other.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'll go ahead and wrap it up. So take a few more minutes to finish up this discussion. Again, please make sure someone is scribing. Take a few more minutes to wrap it up.
David's smiling because I thought David was down while the scotch from my trip. No, it's the first time I've seen this. There's 5 members. Amazing.
You can go ahead and start. They're starting to calm down.
So we're going to go ahead and give people an opportunity to share everything in your conversation or anything in your conversation that you want to share in terms of things you've learned, things that either the diocese or the task force or both can be helpful with. And if people have things to share, please go to the microphones that are numbered in the aisles. And it could be about any of the questions or any of the conversation.
Microphones are open. Anyone? Yes. Microphone 1. Don't do anything. Microphone 1, please. Don't.
1 now. There we go. James Rodenheiser, St. Clair's, Ann Arbor. The number one source of visitors to my church are Google ad clicks. And I would love it if instead of them going to my website, there was an awesome short video that was about diversity in various ways, and not just who we are, but maybe who we aspire to be, that was emotionally gripping, that made any visitor say, oh, yeah, I want to go visit an Episcopal church. And I wonder if we could come up with some short videos like that that we all could link to as different congregations. Thank you.
Microphone 2, please.
Now it's on. I'm Peter Trumbore from St. Mary's in Lake Orion. One of the things that we talked about is that it was primarily, and I guess a lot of it was coming from me actually, about some of the difficulties that we experience. And I think a primary one is simply acknowledging that this is a problem that we should in fact address. I don't know that certainly within our congregation or within maybe many of our congregations, whether we have gotten to that point, that this is something that we are called to deal with. And in settings when we have talked about this, it's been uncomfortable for people. And I think partly that's because people, I think in many cases, come to church to be comforted but not to be confronted. And so this idea that we can do both, right? That we can comfort and can challenge and can call people to acknowledge and then seek to address these issues, I think is an important step for all of us to take.
Microphone 3, please.
Hello, I'm Martha Hanoyan from Trinity Episcopal Church in Belleville, and we were talking about possibility of a book group that would meet to discuss, talk about books about social issues, $2 a day, nickel diamond in America, things like that. Kind of a side door entry into the conversations that aren't so threatening to people. Might be a good way to kind of start conversations.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
We were.
Who are you, please?
I'm sorry. Judith Harmon, St. Aidan's, Ann Arbor. We were talking about authenticity and talking about it being hard, right? It makes us nervous. We're going to make terrible mistakes. And so I guess I wanted us to be able to have a sense of humor, but when it's happening, there's nothing funny about it. I'm recalling a service that I planned at Incarnation back in my internship, and it was to honor the diversity and Native American spirituality and their presence among us, and I had gone through a lot to include Native American music and prayers and altars, everything, and the Native American community in our midst was very pleased until the Sunday school teacher, who was a college student, brought the kids out wearing headbands and feathers. Oh. And it was like it went down the tubes. And there was nothing funny about it, but I guess I want to hold it up as something funny. Not really, but you know what I mean? That I did not foresee that happening. Foolish person that I was, I did not foresee that happening. So then it was dismaying. We had this event that we want. So I guess I want to hold up fear and hold up how do we fly, how do we build the airplane while we're flying when we're going to put things in the wrong place and not know we needed a part that wasn't there. And once the bell has sounded, we've already made this terrible mistake. How do you get out of that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Yes, my name is Sue Inslee, and I'm from St. John's in Howell, Michigan. What I want to say is we do not have a community that really is diverse at all, other than maybe people that are handicapped and physically handicapped or challenged. It doesn't seem as though there is a vehicle that we could use, but I do think it's very important for people to acknowledge it. So I'm not too sure how we would go about that, because there just is not in our community any diversity in terms of people.
Thank you. Anyone else? Microphone 1.
Hang on.
Has the microphone been set to on? If it has, please don't turn it off again. Yeah. Please leave all the microphones on and let the sound team mute and unmute. or replace batteries. No, we'll bring it to you. We'll bring it to you. Or we'll bring you 2 batteries. Oh, we know that one's working.
Well, Andrea Morrow just said, I have a playground voice and I probably don't need the microphone. I could turn around and holler, and I'm sure you would all hear me. But my name is Mita Oliveira from historic St. Matthew, St. Joseph in Detroit. We too are in a fairly non-diversified community that is gradually and fairly rapidly changing. One thing that we did, and we're continuing to do that I think is a beginning of the solution is we need the exposure. If you're not in that diversified environment, you can start still getting exposure. So we started a series of cultural awareness and diversity services. We conducted one last year with the Salvation Army and the Filipino Americans. They came to our church. They brought the Filipino food. They brought the music. They brought, their ministers are called majors. They did the sermon. We had to remind them it had to be 15 minutes, not 45. And they were accommodating. And they even, we have liturgical dance, and they even did hula as liturgical dance to How Great Is Our God. And afterward, during the coffee hour, it was really wonderful. Everyone talked and communicated, and it was really wonderful. And we're working on a series which will continue. Egyptian Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox, synagogues. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, somebody said don't forget Islam. So it's a beginning. And again, it's mutually. Also, we had handouts and information about Salvation Army as well as the Filipino American community. So something like that to me is a big beginning. And we learned and they learned, and it was a great thing. And we also support them every month when they have their monthly meeting in Southfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Beth Taylor from St. John's in Royal Oak. Some things lend themselves to large groups, like public lectures and education and forums. Some things lend themselves to small groups, and we were talking about how some of us have been powerfully transformed by groups like EFM, that Education for Ministry, that meet over time with covenanted groups that agree to stay together and go through the ups and downs and the embarrassing moments and are prayerful about their conversations. And we were thinking it would be cool to either discover or create, perhaps with Whitaker, a curriculum that could be used in congregations for about 10 people who would stay together for 3 or 4 years to intentionally talk about race self-reflectively, and also about how then to transform not only ourselves but our congregation over time in covenanted groups.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
Lisa West Gorman, St. Anne's Walled Lake. I heard a couple of people mention we're not diverse in our area, and it got me to think, just because we're homogeneous and maybe we all look the same doesn't mean we're not diverse. And to think about diversity in other ways, not necessarily race, if it's not a race situation in your particular area, think about the other things that make your area diverse.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
And this is the last speaker.
Well, 1 and 3. We'll make these 2 the last. 1, then 3.
Thank you, Bishop. Paul Castelli, St. Michael's, Grosse Pointe Woods. One of the things we talked about, and with the range of parishes, some being a little bit more diverse than others, having a program involved in this with parish partnerships, whether it's between two parishes where one has great diversity and the other doesn't, or if it's just two different parishes where one's predominantly one demographic and the other is predominantly another demographic, and having these two parishes frequently in conversation with each other for holy conversations and listening sessions and other ways that we can engage this together and broaden our way of thinking and acting towards this goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Ellis Clifton, St. Clement's Inkster. Once again, I'd like to piggyback on what the last speaker to microphone 2 said about thinking about diversity outside of the normal ways that we do. St. Clement's, as a New Visions church, looked at the diversity that the non-obvious diversity that exists there in Inkster. And we've made an intentional effort to reach out to those persons of various educational levels achieved, various economic diversities of the population of Inkster and Westland. And in addition to that, I'd like to remind people that probably in many communities, unlike some of the other denominations or some other churches that do this intentionally, Inkster has an unbelievable gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender population that that we can begin to reach out, and it would be my prayerful hope that one day we can do so there at St. Clement's and utilize diversity in its fullest meaning of the word, and not just the narrow confines that we have been used to thinking.
Thank you.
We're going to close with a prayer, which is on the back of your packet, the last page. And after that, if you could turn your pages with your notes, send them to the aisles that have the microphones in them, so 1, 2, and 3, so that the pages can collect them. Dearest one, increase the capacity of my heart. Take its edges and stretch them out to include all in me that I do not love, all in my family that I judge, all in my church that I fear, and all in the world that doesn't fit. Amen.
Pages, if you all could collect those pages, we'd be most appreciative. And thank you very much, everybody, for your work at this convention and your discussions. Thank you for your vulnerability and your commitment to this work.
Thank you, Michelle. Please send your pages toward the pages. Yes, please send your documents towards the aisles where there are microphones. Pages are collecting now. And while that is happening, the chair recognizes Ms. Lizzie Anderson, Royal Oak, St. John's, chair of the deputation to General Convention, who will begin their report.
Good afternoon, everyone. I had the honor and privilege of serving you all and our diocese at General Convention this summer as the chair of our deputation. Please excuse me, I'm getting over a bit of a cold. So I believe Rick has a slideshow presentation queued up. Wonderful. So I'm going to go over some of the top 10 highlights of what happened at General Convention this year. Next slide. So the first big deal is that Bishop Michael Curry from North Carolina was elected to be our next presiding bishop. He was elected on the first ballot with 121 votes of a total of 174. The second place person only had 21 votes, so he had far beyond the supermajority. So this was a record-setting election in that sense. This coming Sunday, the 1st, All Saints' Day, he will be installed as the presiding bishop. So it's only one more week until he is our acting presiding bishop in our church. Next slide. Shortly after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that marriage equality was the law of the land, we approved canonical and liturgical changes at General Convention, allowing for same-sex marriage in the church. And Bishop Gibbs talked a little bit about that during his address more thoroughly than I could. Next slide, please. Our budget was passed with an emphasis on racial reconciliation and evangelism. Let's see, sorry, I lost my place. $2.8 million was allocated for evangelism work in the church, and a $2 million initiative, this is a new initiative in the budget, was created for racial justice and reconciliation. Next slide, please. Additionally, we have a mandatory assessment coming to us in 2019. Currently, it's a voluntary assessment of 19%. During the next triennium, it will continue to be voluntary. This coming year in 2016, it will be an 18% assessment. In 2017, it'll be 16.5%. And then in 2018, it will be 15%, and that is the final resting place at this point of the assessment. And it'll continue to be voluntary to kind of ease dioceses into this transition from the mandatory assessment. And without getting a waiver for not paying your full assessment, dioceses will be unable to get grants and loans from the Episcopal Church unless they have special approval from Executive Council. Beginning in January 2016, Executive Council will also begin working with dioceses who may be facing financial hardship, who may not be able to make that assessment, and will be working with them on ways to creatively, if unable to reach that assessment quite yet, work towards that. Next slide, thank you. We're also choosing to try to divest from fossil fuels. A committee will be looking at the groups that we invest our money in and where that money goes, and potentially looking for ways to move that money to groups that are focused more on renewable energy. Also, it was decided that there will be a task force that looks at how the church can effectively aid in renewable energy and preventing climate change or reducing its impact on climate change. The committee will have one representative from each of the 9 provinces, and there was also a resolution that calls each province to a regional consultative group, which will have no fewer than 5 experts in areas of environmental sustainability appropriate to the demographic, ecological, cultural, and geographic specifics of each region. Additionally, the church was looking at structural changes. There was a lot of talk about a TREC report, if some of you heard about that, the Task Force for Reimagining the Episcopal Church. And they presented a series of resolutions that gave us ideas and avenues for changing the structure. 2 resolutions were passed. One is Executive Council's appointment power expands to a chief operating officer, a chief financial officer, and a chief legal officer. That legal officer is a new position created by the resolution. Another reduces the number of the church's standing commissions from 14 to 2. Those 2 are the Standing Commission on Structure, Governance, Constitution, and Canons, and the Standing Commission on Liturgy and Music. So any work that falls under that jurisdiction or in slightly more specific jurisdictions, there will be study committees and task force created to complete that work, and those groups will expire at the next General Convention unless they've been renewed by General Convention. We also voted to oppose divestment in Israel and Palestine. It's a very complicated issue, and for us to continue to engage in work of reconciliation and interreligious relations, we found it best to not work toward divestment at this time, so that we can continue to work with our partners in the Holy Land. and the lives of Palestinians on the ground. Additionally, the church reaffirms the vocation of itself as an agent of reconciliation and restorative justice, and recognizes that meaningful reconciliation can help to engender sustainable, long-lasting peace, and that such reconciliation must incorporate both political action, locally driven grassroots efforts. Resolution CO18 also expresses solidarity with and support for Christians in Israel and the Israeli-occupied territories. And it affirms the work of the Episcopal Diocesan Jerusalem in healing, education, and pastoral care. It also affirms the work of Christians engaged in relationship building, interfaith dialogue, nonviolence training, and advocacy for the rights of Palestinians. It also urges Episcopalians to demonstrate their solidarity with the region by taking a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Also, some exciting news. We're looking at creating plans for prayer book revision and hymnal revision. So this General Convention, it was elected that the Standing Committee on Liturgy and Music will create plans to revise these books. And so those plans will then be presented at the next General Convention in 2018, and then things will move forward. Additionally, with liturgics in mind, a new revised version of Holy Women, Holy Men with additional saints commemorations was approved. Lesser Feasts and Fasts is still the authorized supplemental calendar of commemorations. And the new Holy Women, Holy Men is now called A Great Cloud of Witnesses. Convention also decided to admit that alcohol does, in fact, affect us all in the wake of the tragic events in Maryland. And so there were some resolutions regarding alcohol and other substances in the ordination process. So ordinands will now be questioned at the beginning of their discernment process regarding addiction and substance use, not only in their own personal lives, but their family systems as well, because it impacts you at multiple levels, no matter whether it's you yourself or a close relative or a friend. And additionally, the church acknowledges their role in the culture of alcohol and drug abuse. Thankfully, we have a very thorough policy in our own diocese that talks about having options that are equally inclusive to both people who choose to drink alcohol and choose to not for one reason or another. And so I would urge congregations to look further at that policy that we have already in place, because it did influence a lot of the resolutions regarding this at General Convention, and figure out if you guys are working with that policy or if you need to improve on your compliance with that policy. We also decided that there are ways that we need to show greater solidarity with persecuted Christians. So we need to step up our support of people in Pakistan, Syria, Liberia, South Sudan, and Sudan, and from those whom the church needs to support and show its solidarity for those who live in fear of death, starvation, and displacement in their war-ravaged or extremist-influenced countries. Luckily, we have people like Reverend Terry Polarski who are spearheading this endeavor to welcome Syrian refugees in our own diocese. So this kind of work is already happening here. Next slide. I'll ask you to stand as I call your name. Cedric Flanori, are you in here? He's in the back. Paul Castelli, Judith Shellhammer, and myself were your first 4 lay deputies. Margaret Wessel Walker, Denise Crenshaw, Peter Trumbore, and Stephen Ott were your alternates. Our clergy deputies are Reverend Lisa Tucker Gray, Reverend Julia Hutter Bailey, Reverend Ronald Bird, Reverend Phil Dinwiddie. I believe Phil had to leave early for a funeral. The very Reverend Ellis Clifton, Reverend Laurel Dayhill, Reverend Dr. Richard Hamlin, and Reverend George Davenich. We are clergy deputies and alternates. So I want to thank all of you for being wonderful partners in this ministry. And I would like to thank you, the diocese, for supporting us in our ministry and trusting us with this great endeavor. I'd like to close out with a video that Lisa put together for you all. And thank you very much for your time.
I might point out it's never too early to begin planning for General Convention. Those of you who might desire to run for deputy, whether you've already served on this deputation or have designs on getting a free trip to Austin, Texas, might want to remember that according to the Constitution and canons of the Diocese of Michigan, we will elect our deputies next year at this convention. So keep that in mind as we go forward. The chair would like to recognize the Reverend Joanne Kennedy Slater, St. Luke's Ypsilanti, for the report on the committee of reference. I would ask the pages to please hand out resolution number 7.
please take out your guacamole-covered report.
What is with the food images this year?
With the passing of the budget, resolution number 1 and 2 are moved. I direct your attention to resolution number 3. The Committee on Reference moves resolution number 3.
Reauthorizing the ability to solicit financial support for the Justice and Peace Advocacy and Social Service Support Ministries of the Diocese of Michigan. Is there discussion? I see no one coming to a microphone. All those in favor, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your voting cards. Motion carries.
The committee moves resolution number 4.
End mass incarceration. At least give us the subject.
Okay, I didn't know if I was supposed to do
Yes,
that or
please
you.
do that, so we know what we're looking at. Discussion, microphone 1.
Joe Summers, Church of the Incarnation, Pittsfield Township. Increasingly, we're recognizing that mass incarceration has been one of the great evils of our time. It's been compared to the Jim Crow era in terms of its effects on our population. From 1920 to 1972, we had the same rate of incarceration in this country. Then between 1972 and 2012, in that 40-year period, we increased it 5 times. So that in Michigan, we went from an incarcerated population of 10,000 to 53,000. This has had devastating consequences, depriving much-needed resources from the communities of the kind that could keep people out of prison. We now house more mentally ill people in our prisons than used to be in our state hospital system. And in the process, our criminal justice system has also become one of the major instruments of racial discrimination in our society, creating what Michelle Alexander has called a new Jim Crow system, in which tens of millions of Americans have been rendered second-class citizens who are legally discriminated against in areas such as housing, employment, social services, serving on juries, and not being able to vote in many states. Last year, there's a new collaboration to end mass incarceration was formed. This resolution comes from them. It's made up of all the major criminal justice reform organizations in our state. The good news is we've already reduced our prison population by 10,000 through our reentry program. The state legislature is considering a proposal which will reduce it by another 10,000, but that still leaves us with a rate 3 times where we should be, which is what this resolution will address. Lastly, I just want to mention Thursday night we have an amazing speaker in Ann Arbor coming to talk about how to set up restorative justice systems on a county basis. This is the key, one of the keys to ending mass incarceration. I've got posters about it.
Thank you. Microphone 1 again.
Good afternoon. T.J. Spitma with the Church Incarnation in Ann Arbor. On any given day in the United States, 1 in 10 black men in their 30s is in prison or jail. In fact, 1 out of 3 black men of all ages can expect to serve time at some point in their life. That figure is 1 in 6 for Latino men and 1 in 17 for white men. This glaring racial inequity is actually a result of how the justice system was designed to work, a system with an undeniable historic connection to slavery that was outlawed a century and a half ago.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
I'm Elizabeth Lamoro from St. George's, Milford. I only object to the part where the rationale says incarceration must be regarded as a measure of last resort.
We don't vote on the rationale. We're only voting on
that.
There's nothing about the rationale that is a part of the resolution. We are only voting on lines 7 through 33. We don't speak to the rationale.
Okay. Well, I didn't agree with it.
Thank you, but we don't speak to the rationale. Further discussion of the resolution itself? I see no one else rising. All those in favor of Resolution 4, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Resolution 4 is adopted.
Present Resolution Number 5, Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Before the convention is Resolution Number 5. Is there discussion? Microphone 1.
Joe Summers, Church of the Incarnation. I'll be much shorter this time. First, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was an act passed nationally to protect the rights of religious minorities, particularly Native Americans and Muslims. It's now being turned into becoming the justification for allowing discrimination against LGBTQ people in the name of religious freedom. So it's kind of like a Trojan horse that, if you can imagine the equivalent of if after our civil rights legislation, a bill was passed that it would allow people to discriminate against people of color on the basis of their religion, you can see how it would undo everything we had just accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? I see no one coming to a microphone. All those in favor of Resolution 5, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your cards. Resolution 5 is adopted.
We present Resolution Number 6, Time to Care.
Before the convention is Resolution Number 6. Is there discussion? I see no one coming to a microphone. All those in favor of Resolution 6, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your cards. Thank you. Resolution 6 is adopted.
Is this called number 7?
Resolution, yes.
We present Resolution Number 7, Black Lives Matter.
Before pages, what happened? We have people still without copies. Please raise your voting card if you do not have a copy. Oh. How did that happen? Okay. Since there are a few of you who just got it, I'll give you a moment to read through it. Discussion, microphone 3.
My name is Ian Edney. I'm from Monroe, Trinity. I rise obviously in favor of this resolution. I think it is incredibly important for us as spiritual people to take a stand on these sorts of issues. I think that the violence happening to our brothers and sisters of color points to a need for a rebirth of the human spirit. And the only way, or the best way anyway, for that to happen is through active involvement by the church. I think I will pretty much end there with a quotation from Thomas Jefferson. I think I can say it. I tremble for my country when I consider that God is just.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Microphone 3 again.
Bill Wiley, Kellerman, St. Peter's Episcopal. I have voice but not vote, so I'm not in a position to make an amendment. What strikes me about the Black Lives Matter movement is that it really is a new civil rights movement among young people, and it's really happening in the streets and at many levels. I support the measures here related to law enforcement and prayer, but support for the Black Lives Matter movement involves the streets. There are pastors in Ferguson who are doing nonviolence training and who are doing direct action along with young people, following and leading young people. That's the one thing that I feel like is missing, and I'm not in a position to move an amendment, but I speak to it as a need. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Before we vote, I would make an editorial comment. In the interest of equality, I believe the resolution should be communicated to the presiding bishop and the president of the House of Deputies, not just to an office. So if we could take office out as an editorial oversight, please. Joanne.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If there's no objection, we will strike office in that last resolved. I mean, we don't want to send it to the presiding bishop's office. We like to send it to the presiding bishop and that president of the House of Deputies. They are the two presiding officers of our church. Thank you. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of Resolution 7, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Resolution 7 is adopted. If you could hold on 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to appoint the Reverend Drew Van Keulen as a bishop's appointment to the Commission on Ministry, and I ask a motion to confirm. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Thank you. The chair recognizes the secretary for the purpose of the call of the 182nd Annual Convention.
Pursuant to Article 4 of the Constitution of the Diocese of Michigan, I move approval of the call of the 182nd Annual Convention of the Diocese of Michigan to be held on October 21st and 22nd, 2016, in Lansing, Michigan, at the Radisson Hotel, Lansing Center.
Is there discussion? I'm sure all the football folks are checking their calendars really fast. It makes no, never mind. This is really just a formality. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Thanks. I wanted to make sure you were still awake. The chair recognizes the Reverend Joanne Kennedy Slater for purposes of resolutions of courtesy. And remember, please, read slowly for the interpreters and for everyone else to be able to hear. We're not in a rush.
Resolved that the 181st Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan express its appreciation and gratitude to the Convention Planning Committee, all committees of convention, diocesan staff, worship leaders and planners, altar guild, volunteers, youth, interpreters for the deaf, our parliamentarian, and all others who offered and used their many gifts to plan and complete the arrangements for this annual convention. Resolved that the 181st Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan express its sincere gratitude and appreciation to the management and staff of the Suburban Collection Diamond Center and Hyatt Place Hotel in Novi for their hospitality, service, and assistance in housing and feeding this gathering. Resolved that the 181st Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan express its gratitude and appreciation to Dr. Ivy Forsyth Brown, Heidi Kim, Darius Hillman, and the Reverend Dr. Jay Johnson for their time and presence among us, for guiding us into the waters of reconciliation, race relations, and diversity. Resolved that the 181st Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan send its love, prayers, and appreciation to Mrs. Shirley Gordon, Mrs. Alma Mason, and Mrs. June McGee, widows of former bishops of this diocese. Resolved that the 181st Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan send its love, prayers, and appreciation to the Right Reverend R. Stewart Word Jr. and his wife Kristen, and give thanks for their meaningful and pastoral ministry among us. Resolved that the 181st Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan express our love, appreciation, and support to the Right Reverend Wendell N. Gibbs Jr. and his wife Carla. We give thanks for your continuing leadership through your personal and corporate witness, your pastoral ministry, and your spiritual guidance, and keeping us mindful of the blessings of diversity and responsive to the dignity of every human being. We offer our collective prayers for your protection and spirit-filled insight as we face the joys and challenges of serving God's mission in the days and years ahead. Sir.
Did you actually move those, Joanne?
Yes, sir. I moved because you moved, and then I moved.
So there was plenty of movement, but Joanne so moves. All those in favor of the aforementioned resolutions of courtesy, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Thank you. I would add one note of information for you. Just this past week or so, not this week, last week, Stu Wood celebrated his 27th anniversary as a bishop of the church. And also, I would bring to your attention, many of you are not aware, the Reverend Ruth Strang, who has been an amazing pillar of this diocese for a long time, a retired surgeon, physician, has suffered an aneurysm and has been hospitalized for several days in the University of Michigan. It is, no visitors, please. She is not doing well. I would ask your continued prayers for her. I got to see her a couple of days after the surgery, and it's been a little bit of a roller coaster since then. So I ask your prayers for Ruth. The chair recognizes the secretary for announcements.
A reminder to leave your Are You Willing to Serve forms properly filled out, and your evaluation form also filled out on your tables, and the pages will collect them. Also, a cane was left in the back of the business session, and it can be retrieved from the registration table. Those are the only announcements that I am aware of.
Thank you. A few final words. I have run into many of you in the hallways of this convention center during breaks and between various and sundry events. And a number of you have expressed your delight and joy over this convention. This convention could not have happened This convention and its program could not have happened if it had not been for people like Michelle Meach and my staff. I give grateful thanks. And I want to remind you of my words. We have plenty of work to do. It is clear that there is much conversation, much action, much need for reflection, much action. We need to be in relationship with one another because that is how God created us to be. And I urge you, strongly urge you, to be in conversation with one another whenever it is possible. We do not have to agree with one another to be in this room together. One of the reasons why for 15 and a half years I have attempted to limit the number of resolutions we have as much as possible without quieting your voice is because when we have resolutions, it sets up winners and losers. And frankly, from where I sit, I see a room full of winners. And a room full of winners should be in relationship with one another. We're not always going to agree, friends. In fact, we're never going to completely agree on everything. But we can be one with one another in the love of Jesus Christ. So let's take this next year to make it a priority in our lives together, our lives as individuals, our lives as the community of the Diocese of Michigan. I think you will find it will make us all better people. With that, please stand. Let us pray. Holy One, you have breathed your Spirit upon this convention and called us to a new place of being. Give us the courage, the strength, the fortitude, the will, the means, the opportunity, and the love to follow where you lead. Bless us as we go forth from this place. Keep us always servants of your will. Keep us mindful of the needs of those we serve. And may we be blessed this day in the name of Jesus, the Son, our God, the Creator, your Spirit, our Redeemer. May this blessed, holy Trinity make us, preserve us, and give us your peace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. The Convention of the Diocese of Michigan stands adjourned sine die.